we seem to have lost this concept that God might intervene and there may be able to be verifiable information to be able to tell it happened. Is God an interventionist God? Does he step into this world, hear prayers, and act in the way in other cases like he did with this priest? And then I began to study more about whether God does intervene, like the story of Fatima. As a lawyer looking back, I couldn't believe that this claim of 70,000 people witnessed the most colossal event since the time of Christ's resurrection occurring in our times. And no one's talking about it. And why? Is there something about the witness's testimony that was failing? Why doesn't the church talk about it? And that concerned me that we seem to have lost this concept that God might intervene and there may be able to be verifiable information to be able to tell it happened. So I then began to study cases that have claimed mystical phenomena in our world today. And with science advances the way it has, we're able to look at things in a more detailed way than they would have been done before. And so when there were claims of people having apparitions, I wanted to know what happens in their brain. Why are they seeing things that we don't see? Why are they hearing things that we don't hear? Is the brain acting in an abnormal sort of way to reflect this behaviour? So then it went on from there to other things. I heard about the statue of Christ crying and bleeding in Bolivia. And, no one ever takes these things seriously. They think that perhaps, this is all just a hoax. And that's the mainstream media's view. But the question was, have we used the best of science to be able to examine what the claim is? Is it blood? Does it have genetic material? I mean, that story of the statue, which you know about from my book and from my documentaries, is an incredible story. And it's part of a mosaic of things that have happened in recent times that all have a meaning. But the most important story I think that we did, well, there's two very important stories, which we'll come to later, namely the Eucharistic miracle of Buenos Aires, which I was privileged to have been able to do the investigation on for now 20 years. But when it came to this story of mystics and whether God is intervening in our world, I was introduced to a person in Bolivia called Cata Rivas. She claimed to have been receiving messages from Jesus and she claimed to have had the stigmata. I interviewed her. I was impressed by her. I interviewed her spiritual director, and I got some footage of when she had the stigmata on a previous occasion. I looked at that. I interviewed the witnesses who were there, and I thought this sounds like a plausible story. Back in Australia, I am the lawyer for was a lawyer for, now he's passed away, Australia's most notable most notable investigative journalist, who's was a household name in this country for many years. What he said, people believed in. He was regarded as being the man you got when you've got a difficult story and you want to find the truth. Now, I approached him with this story of what was happening in Bolivia with this person. And his reaction was, look, he wasn't even prepared to look at the footage. He says, look, these things don't happen. He says, I've done stories like this. There's always another explanation. These things just don't happen. I said, Mike, and his person was named Mike Willesee. Everyone in Australia knows him. He said to me, these things don't happen. And I said to him, you've got a reputation for being able to present a story based upon your examination and you present the truth. Here, you don't even want to look at the evidence and you proffer an explanation. How many other stories in your journalistic career have you treated that way? And I said, why don't you at least look at the facts and then tell me what you think? And I said, better still, prove me wrong. Well, that struck a spark in him. He decided, I've got to check this thing out. So he came with me to Bolivia and I introduced him to this person. While we were there, Jesus speaks to her, and this is something that's hard to believe. And I might just interpose this thing, we look at the history of the saints in our Catholic history, and we see people like St. Catherine of Siena, Padre Pio, St. Francis, and they've had extraordinary experiences. And we often think to ourselves, wouldn't it have been great to have been there in those times, to see these people, to witness what they experience, to see what happens when Jesus or God the Father is dictating to St. Catherine of Siena volumes of profound theology, which ended up being something that cured the church of its time. But I've been able to do this with this modern day mystic, film it as she's been receiving dictation, with messages to humanity of the same caliber as St. Catherine of Siena. But at this stage, I introduced Mike Willesee to her, and she says through her to this journalist, Mike, I've given you many talents, and I want you to use them for me. I want a program made, and he explained more about that program. And he says, Katia will have the stigmata, not today. It will happen in 2 months' time, on the day after the Feast of Corpus Christi. Now, can you imagine this? We're actually filming someone predicting they're going to have the stigmata.
Hi, everyone. This is John Henry Weston. We hope you enjoyed this program. To see more like it, be sure to hit the subscribe button below to get all the latest content from LifeSite News. Check the links in the description to read more and connect with us on social media so that you can stay up to date with all the latest life, family, faith, and freedom news. Thanks for watching, and may God bless you.